Hey everybody, this is Ads coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Today's episode is sponsored by Avalo, which offers free 24/7 mental and emotional health support to anybody on your Android or iOS phones because life's too hard to go it alone. So today we're going to be talking about the medicalization of suffering. And this is a really challenging subject today because there's a lot of nuances. While on one hand I have a lot of respect for individuals that are promoting self-care, I think it's a fine line between using mental health as a crutch for not accepting responsibility for your life. And where I think it gets to be complicated is in the level of agency that someone feels to participate with influencing their life. What I mean is, some people feel very little capability to influence their existing situation, or they don't know how to. For example, when I was in my early 20s, I was extremely depressed, had suicidal thoughts all of the time. And so in my experience, I started to have suicidal thoughts periodically, and they were scary at first, but then I started to have them more frequently, and then they became more common, and I became more comfortable with the idea. And after a certain amount of time, I was having more suicidal thoughts throughout the day than I was having less. So if you think about like your mental energy, I hit that switch to 51% of my thoughts were actually all negative, and so I was really thinking a lot about what's a potential out, and suicide was a way out for me. And so I felt very little agency in that situation to change my feelings, to change the way I was feeling when I woke up. And it took me getting into therapy to actually kind of break that mold. So I didn't feel the agency, I didn't have the tools. And so self-care for me is a tool to help people rationalize coping with struggle, strife, negative stimuli. And so for me, the fine line between self-care as a crutch and self-care as a tool is whether or not the self-care activity is promoting agency within yourself to overcome whatever that negative situation is. So, for example, in my case of depression, one could say that on the weekends I was abusing drugs and alcohol as a means of self-care, and it really was. I was self-medicating, rather, and that was a crutch. It was not something that gave me agency to get over my feelings of depression or suicide. So I thought it was, and I knew it was self-destructive. And I think there's a more positive brand of self-care, like mental health days, meditation, going to the spa, saying no to friends, saying no to obligations you don't want to do. Those are all positive self-care activities if they build agency in overcoming the negative stimulus that you're needing to react to with self-care. And I struggle oftentimes when I hear people talk about self-care, and you've got a lot of people on the Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan side of the spectrum saying, or the David Goggins world of like, stay hard, just get over it, just fight through it. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I also do think there are situations where people don't have the skills, people don't have the mindset or the approach that gives them the agency to overcome whatever that negative situation is. So for me, I didn't have the capability to get over depression and suicide, so my brain started coming up with solutions, which were, why don't you just kill yourself? And by any definition of the measure, I was very clinically depressed. And I wasn't put on medication, and I don't have a problem with medication. But what we see in today's world in the psychiatric space are drastic increases in the prevalence rates of psychiatric medications. And whether or not that is because prevalence rates are increasing, or we have a better diagnostic capability, or our education or our technology is better around the actual drugs, that's all for the medical professionals to debate. And I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody that they should or shouldn't be taking a medication for mental health complications. The underlying biopsychopathology, or the underlying, essentially the let me just pull up so I don't get this word wrong. The physiophathology being not well understood of mental health conditions is another reason to at least consider therapy alongside mental health medications. But the agency that can be afforded from a mental health medication is something that's great. They can offer a potential change in the brain chemistry for somebody to feel like they have more power in overcoming some of their strife. And so I'm very supportive of that. What I'm not supportive of is the perception that once I get on a mental health medication, I should be on it for the rest of my life. I have no problem with those individuals that is the case. I just don't think that should be the assumption that a pill is going to be the solution, because again, I think it comes back to like accountability for one's own existence. And while mental health medications can build agency, especially when paired with therapy, we live on a dangerous precipice right now where we're relying on the medicalization of suffering and the commercialization of suffering by the drug companies and the mental health industry, the insurance industry, the whole medical industrial complex profits off of human suffering today. And it's one of the main drivers of revenue. In fact, depression is the number one cause of disability, costing hundreds of billions of dollars in lost productivity every year. So depression, lack of engagement, is the number one cost driving component of our economy, or inhibitor. And so it's very hard to come up with solutions that build agency in individuals. And in reality, there are few ways that you can profit off of building agency in a person. So the medicalization of suffering is an extremely convenient way to build profit potential off of human suffering, which is something that we've, as humans, have done for eternity. It's, bread and butter of certain cultures, but it's something that I'm always thinking about when I hear kind of the self-care movement. And if those self-care activities are building agency to overcome that negative stimulus, that depression, anxiety, whatever those feelings are, that's great. That's something that's helping. If it's kicking the can down the road, then it's not, and it's hard to know when one is doing that. A potential solution is ask your friends. Hey, do you feel like I'm actually addressing this issue, or do you feel that I'm not addressing this issue, that I'm avoiding it, using escapism? So the medicalization of suffering is something that the younger generation is really going to have to be cognizant of, because of those two spectrums. You've got the medical industry telling you, take the pill, do the thing, we'll solve the issue. And then you've got, kind of the go hard people, just brute strength, force yourself through it, which I don't think either one of them is an accurate representation of the gray space in the middle that we need to respect and understand if we're to come up with sustainable solutions to not just having crutches when it comes to human suffering.